Morning, I invite the Honourable Minister responsible for education to grace us with prayers.
Let us pray. Almighty God, from whom all wisdom and power are derived, we beseech thee so to direct and prosper the deliberations of the Legislative Assembly now assembled, that all things may be ordered upon the best and surest foundations for the glory of thy name and for the safety, honour and welfare of the people of these islands. Bless our Sovereign Lady, Queen Elizabeth II, Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, Charles, Prince of Wales, and all of the royal family. Give grace to all who exercise authority in our Commonwealth, that peace and happiness, truth and justice, religion and piety may be established amongst us. Especially we pray for the Governor of our islands, the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, official members and ministers of Cabinet, and members of the Legislative Assembly, that we may be enabled faithfully to perform the responsible duties of our high office. All this we ask for thy great name's sake. Let us pray the Lord's Prayer together. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. The Lord bless us and keep us. The Lord make his face shine upon us and be gracious unto us. The Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace now and always. Amen.
Please remain standing for the administration of oath and affirmation. Madam Clerk.
Administration of oaths or affirmations. Oath of affirmation due execution by Mr. Eric Lennox Bush, the Honourable Acting Deputy Governor, to be the temporary ex officio member of the Legislative Assembly.
I'll invite Mr. Bush to take his place at the dais.
I, Eric Lennox Bush, do swear that I will well and truly serve Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, and the people of the Cayman Islands in the office of ex officio member of the Legislative Assembly. So help me God. I, Eric Lennox Bush, do swear that I will faithfully and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, her heirs and successors, according to law. So help me God.
Mr. Bush, I welcome you to the Honourable Legislative Assembly and now invite you to take your seat. Please be seated.
Reading by the Honourable Speaker of Messages and Announcements.
I have given permission to the Girl Brigade to make a presentation to the Honourable Parliament. To facilitate this presentation, I'm going to suspend the House for 5 minutes and ask that members would kindly remain in the seats for this long overdue explanation and indeed presentation. The House is now suspended for 5 minutes. I'll ask the Sergeant to invite Mrs. Miller and her Girl Brigades.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. This crystal sculpture was presented to the Legislative Assembly by Sir Cyril Black, a member of the British Parliament and International Vice President and Treasurer of the Girls' Brigade, on behalf of the youth of the Cayman Islands on the opening of this building on July 31st, 1972. It symbolizes purity and youth, with crystal spires reaching outwards to the heights that can be achieved.
Madam Speaker, this gift has remained on a shelf in an office here for the past 42 years, with no one knowing what it was or what it was doing there. The Girls' Brigade would, therefore, like to present this Perspex case to you today and request that it now be placed on public display so that present and future legislators and visitors may enjoy its beauty and know its significance.
The House is resumed. On behalf of the members of the House, we'd like to thank Mrs. Miller and her Girls' Brigade for this generous donation and for recording it into the history books of the Hansard, and we look forward to putting it in a very prominent place within this Honourable Legislative Assembly. Madam Clerk.
Statements by honourable members and ministers of the Cabinet.
I recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, members of this Honourable House are well aware of the unwarranted inclusion of the Cayman Islands on the UK Financial Conduct Authority's high-risk countries list, which the FCA posted on its website on 18th of July this year. Today, I am pleased to officially inform members that this list has been removed from the FCA's website and that the FCA does not plan to publish such a list in the future. Furthermore, at the insistence of our Minister for Financial Services, the FCA will fully review the methodology that resulted in Cayman's listing in the first place. Madam Speaker, I commend the appropriately diplomatic but forthright approach demonstrated by the Minister in his communication with the FCA, which commenced prior to the list's publication. As the Minister noted in his letter to the FCA, the inclusion of the Cayman Islands was arbitrary and indeed incorrect. The Cayman Islands not only adheres to international AML CFT standards, but we are also at the forefront of setting standards. So again, I commend the Minister and his staff for an exceptional result. I also wish to recognize the diplomacy of the Managing Director of the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority, who also wrote to the FCA. Both the Minister and the MD benefited from advice given to them by the Attorney General and the General Counsel for CIMA, as well as officials in the Ministry of Financial Services, the Anti-Money Laundering Unit, and the Financial Reporting Authority. I believe that the approach taken has been instrumental in the outcomes of this matter, and that it has set the stage for the continuing, and we trust, productive conversations on a peer-to-peer basis between CIMA and the FCA, which is the regulator of the UK's financial services industry. The dialogue needs to continue, Madam Speaker, because while the FCA has committed to reviewing its methodology, we still do not know more about the approach that led to the 18th of July listing, and we do not know the intending methodology for future compilations, if any. CIMA's vital role, therefore, is to provide information to the FCA officials to ensure that going forward, they are accurately informed about Cayman's regime. This will include providing them with third-party assessments and data that, while publicly available, apparently did not factor into the research that was conducted in the compilation of the FCA's 18th of July list. Madam Speaker, while the FCA's list is not a blacklist, which comes with a raft of negative connotations, the FCA's list nevertheless could raise questions regarding Cayman's reputation, and this subsequently could affect her business. It is therefore necessary to safeguard against potential misinformation, if you will, by making sure that the FCA is aware of such evidence, such as Cayman's ratings in the OECD's 2013 Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for Tax Purposes rankings, and our practices regarding the collection of Know Your Customer information on legal structures. Finally, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Financial Services and I had secured appointments with the Treasury Minister and the Minister for Overseas Territories to address this issue, and had proposed to travel to London this coming weekend. However, in the present circumstances, we do not think that meetings with the ministers at this time are strictly necessary. We shall continue to carefully monitor the situation to ensure that the interests of the Cayman Islands are fully protected and defended. And I give that undertaking, Madam Speaker, to this Honourable House and to all of the citizens of the Cayman Islands.
Government business, bills, first readings. The Grand Court Amendment Bill 2014.
The bill has been deemed to have been read the first time and set down for its second reading.
The Mutual Funds Amendment Bill 2014.
The bill has been deemed to have been read a first time and is set down for its second reading.
The Merchant Shipping Amendment Bill 2014.
This bill has been deemed to have been read for the first time and is now set down for its second reading.
Motions. Suspension of Standing Order 24-5 to enable a government motion to be dealt with during this meeting.
Recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Order 24-5 to enable the following motion entitled Amendment to the Developing Government Motion number 1415. Sorry, Madam Speaker, the motion is not numbered. The government motion entitled Amendment to the Development Plan 1997 to be dealt with during this meeting, notwithstanding the fact that it does not have the required 5-day notice.
Thank you. The question is that Standing Order 24-5 be hereby suspended to allow a government motion to be dealt with during this current meeting. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. The ayes have it. Accordingly, Standing Order 24.5 is hereby suspended.
Government motion number 1, 2014-2015, Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, electoral boundaries. To be moved with the Premier, the Honourable Minister of Home and Community Affairs.
I once again recognize the Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move Government Motion Number 1 of 2014-15, entitled the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, SI 2009, number 1379. Whereas there is consensus in the government for the adoption of the principle of one elector, one vote as the basis of the electoral system of the Cayman Islands, and whereas the government is desirous that the Cayman Islands be divided into single-member electoral districts, and whereas Section 88, subsection 1 of the Constitution, set out in Schedule 2 to the Cayman Islands Constitution Order, SI 2009, number 1379, in this motion referred to as the Constitution, provides that an electoral boundary commission shall be appointed from time to time at such time as the governor, acting after consultation with the Premier and the leader of the opposition, may determine. And whereas Section 89 of the Constitution provides that an electoral boundary commission shall, as soon as practicable after its appointment, review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which the Cayman Islands are divided, and taking into account the changes or proposed changes, if any, in the number of electoral districts or of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, shall submit a report to the Governor and the Legislative Assembly containing its recommendations for any changes in the number and boundaries of the electoral districts. And whereas Section 60, subsection 2 of the Constitution provides that a law made under Section 59, subsection 2 may increase the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, but no such law shall come into force unless an order by the Governor providing for the electoral districts and their boundaries to take account of the additional elected members in accordance with Section 89 has been made. And whereas at the time when the Electoral Boundary Commission Report 2010 was made, the number of registered electors was 15,300, and whereas at the time of the general elections in 2013, the number of registered electors had increased to 18,434, and whereas the Elections Office has confirmed that the number of electors registered as at 1st July 2014 is 18,364, a 20.03% increase over the 2010 numbers. And whereas due to such large increase in the number of registered electors from 2010 to date, there is a need for an electoral boundary commission to be appointed to review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which the Cayman Islands are divided, taking into account the significant increase in the number of registered electors, proposed changes in the number of electoral districts, and proposed changes in the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly. Be it therefore resolved that the Legislative Assembly agrees that the Governor should be invited, in accordance with Section 88 of the Constitution, to appoint an electoral boundary commission. And be it further resolved that following the making of an order by the Governor, pursuant to Section 89(6) of the Constitution, for the determination of the boundaries of the electoral districts of the Cayman Islands, the government thereafter submits to the Legislative Assembly a bill to make the necessary amendments to the Elections Law 2013 revision in accordance with the said order to enable the establishment of single-member electoral districts in the Cayman Islands, with each elector having one vote. And be it further resolved that the process be completed in good time so as to ensure that the general elections due in 2017 are conducted on the basis of single-member electoral districts, with each elector having one vote.
The motion has been duly moved and is open for debate. Does the Honourable Premier wish to speak there at all?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, there is before this Honorable House this morning a motion by the government which seeks resolutions of this Honorable House, first to establish or to invite Her Excellency to establish an electoral boundary commission, and secondly, Madam Speaker, to commit the government, following the carrying out of any report, any exercise by the Electoral Boundary Commission and the provision of its report, to proceed to bring to this Honorable House the necessary bill to make amendments to the elections law to ensure that the voting districts in the Cayman Islands, that voting districts in the Cayman Islands are created, new voting districts in the Cayman Islands are created, and that the Cayman Islands, the three of them, are divided into single-member electoral districts, with each elector having one vote, in advance of the next general elections, indeed, Madam Speaker, in good time, to ensure that the general elections to be held in 2017 are conducted on the basis of single-member electoral districts, with each elector having but one vote. Madam Speaker, the present arrangement in the Cayman Islands, which has existed for as long as I can recall, is that there are 6 electoral districts. The 5 known districts in Grand Cayman, East End, North Side, Bordentown, Georgetown, and West Bay, making up the first 5, and Cayman Brac and Little Cayman combining to make the 6th electoral district. There are, Madam Speaker, currently 18 elected members of the Legislative Assembly. And so, Madam Speaker, at a minimum, the Cayman Islands would be divided into 18 electoral districts, with each elector or each voter having but one vote, which would be a significant departure from the present arrangement, where we have 2 districts which have one representative, and therefore each voter having but one vote, and other districts having a different number of representatives, and therefore the electors or voters in those districts having a different number of voters. In Georgetown, for instance, voters have 6 votes to cast because there are 6 representatives. In Cayman Brac, they have 2 because there are 2 representatives. And in West Bay and Bordentown, each voter has 4 votes because they have 4 representatives. And so, Madam Speaker, what is proposed is a significant departure from the present arrangement. Madam Speaker, in bringing this motion, the government is carrying out what we believe is our mandate. It is certainly the mandate of the progressives who campaigned on the basis of doing so. And it is a position which the party which I have the honor to lead has held at least since 2002. Madam Speaker, our arrival here today has been preceded by a number of notable events, not least of which was the referendum which was held in 2012. And while the referendum did not carry because the turnout at the polls was well below what was required to ensure that the standard which was set in the referendum law for passage of the referendum would be met. Those who did turn out to vote voted in the majority in favor of a move to, or the adoption of the principle of one person, one vote, or equality of franchise. Madam Speaker, following that, since this government took office, there was a motion brought by the elected member from Northside, from East End, who moved the motion, and seconded by the elected member from Northside, which sought to have this House resolve to bring, for the government to bring a bill within 3 months to amend the elections law to create to create single member constituencies. Madam Speaker, I want to refer to that motion which failed the last time round, and to point out what the difficulties were with that. Madam Speaker, I hesitate to say this much about a matter that is on the order, that is on the business paper for this meeting, but is not yet currently before the House. But I do believe, for the sake of clarity and understanding, I should mention that the same motion, a motion in precisely the same terms, has again been filed by the elected member from East End and the elected member for North Side. I won't say any more about that, but members can draw their own conclusions about the appropriateness of that motion by virtue of my analysis of the motion which failed back in February, because they are in identical terms. Madam Speaker, I just need a moment to put my hand on that motion. Madam Speaker, it is important to understand why the motion which is before the House is in the precise terms that it is in. And to demonstrate that, Madam Speaker, I wish to refer to the failed motion. Not the one to come, the failed motion, which this House dealt with in February. I'm not going to go through the recitals, Madam Speaker, because it's not necessary. The important bit is what it asked this House to resolve to do. And that motion, Madam Speaker, asked the House to resolve that the government shall consider bringing a bill within 3 months to amend the election law revision to introduce an electoral system of single-member constituencies so as to allow the next election to be conducted on the basis of equal suffrage principle of one person, one vote, under the first-past-the-post system, which time frame will allow sufficient time to educate the electors on the changes to the voting system. Madam Speaker, I think that the first point of note is that the resolution sought made no reference whatsoever to the number of electoral districts, or single-member constituencies, as they call them, in it. And I say that, Madam Speaker, because that has been a complaint which we have heard from the elected members from East End and North Side repeatedly on the radio and elsewhere over the course of the last week since this motion, the government motion, has been filed. The motion which is before the House, which we have now brought, mirrors their earlier motion, the resolve section of the earlier motion in that regard, in that it contains no reference to the number of electoral districts. Now, Madam Speaker, while that has been in recent days alluded to by the members from East End and North Side as some sort of deficiency, indeed it is not. And whoever advised them initially about this issue plainly understood that by virtue of the Constitution, the minimum number of members which this House can have is 18. There is no basis in the Constitution at all for the reduction, for this House to be able, by amending any law, to reduce the number of elected members below 18. Madam Speaker, I will refer to the relevant sections of the Constitution. Sections 59 and sections 60. Madam Speaker, Section 59 of the Constitution deals with the composition of the legislature and its power to make laws. Section 59(1) says, there shall be a legislature of the Cayman Islands which shall consist of Her Majesty and a legislative assembly. And Section 59(2), subject to this Constitution, the legislature may make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the Cayman Islands. Section 60, Madam Speaker, 1 says, the legislative assembly shall consist of the Speaker, 18 elected members who shall be persons qualified for election in accordance with this Constitution and elected in the manner provided for in a law enacted for the purposes of Section 93, and the Deputy Governor and the Attorney General ex officio. And then Section 62 provides, Madam Speaker, a law made under Section 59(2) may increase the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, but no law shall come into force unless an order by the governor providing for the electoral districts and their boundaries to take account of the additional elected members in accordance with Section 89 has been made, and B, until the dissolution of the Legislative Assembly next following the enactment of such law. And so, Madam Speaker, on the reading of these two sections together, it is clear that this House, by amending the elections law, could not reduce the number of members of the Legislative Assembly. It may increase them, but it may not reduce them. And I say that, Madam Speaker, in some hope, or in the hope that this will go some way to alleviate the fear by the members from East End and North Side that somehow the actions of the government or the Electoral Boundary Commission may result in the combination of East End and North Side, and one of them would automatically lose their seat. Madam Speaker, a number of their friends and associates have come to me explaining to me that this is the concern that has been expressed. Madam Speaker, it may well be that a boundary commission might possibly recommend the combination of the two districts on the basis that the number of voters in each district will only be about half of the number of voters in all of the other districts, save Cayman Brac. But, Madam Speaker, even if they were to recommend that, and it's not for us to say what the Electoral Boundary Commission may recommend, it's a matter for them. The Boundary Commission would then have to recommend the creation of another electoral district somewhere, because the number of members can't go below 18. So, Madam Speaker, I hope, Madam Speaker, as some on my side have said, that I probably shouldn't have put them out of their misery so early and let them worry a bit more about that. But I want, Madam Speaker, for this debate to proceed on very serious basis, and to ensure that some of the misconceptions which the two members from East End and North Side plainly have and constantly express on the radio and elsewhere can be sorted out very early in this important debate. Madam Speaker, the other misconception which the members seem to have, and certainly which at least one of their advisors continues to reiterate to members of my team, is about the role of the Electoral Boundary Commission. The Electoral Boundary Commission, Madam Speaker, is an independent body. It is not for this House, it is not even for the governor to dictate to the Electoral Boundary Commission what its recommendations are or can be. It is open to this House and members to make proposals about what the number of elected representatives should be or not be, the number of electoral districts should be or not be. This government has chosen not to make any proposal with respect to the number of electoral districts. But we have proposed that the Cayman Islands be divided into single-member electoral districts. That is our proposal. What the Electoral Boundary Commission decides to do about those proposals is a matter for them. All the Constitution requires is that they have regard to the proposals. Madam Speaker, Section 88, subsection 9 makes it clear that none of us or anyone else has the ability to direct or to control the Electoral Boundary Commission. It says, in the exercise of its functions under this Constitution, an Electoral Boundary Commission shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority, not even the members of this House, as big and bad as some of us seem to think that we are. The Electoral Boundary Commission is an independent body. Once it's appointed, it is bound by the provisions of the Constitution and must carry out its duties in accordance with the Constitution, not subject to the direction or control of any member of this House or anybody else. Now, Madam Speaker, Section 89, 1, subsection 1. This is what the Boundary Commission is required to do. An Electoral Boundary Commission shall, as soon as practicable after its appointment, review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which the Cayman Islands are divided. That is, in the present circumstances, to look at the boundaries of the 6 electoral districts which exist. And taking into account the changes or proposed changes, if any, in the number of electoral districts or of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, shall submit a report to the Governor and the Legislative Assembly containing its recommendations for any changes in the number and boundaries of the electoral districts. So, Madam Speaker, it is entitled and required to take into account the changes or proposed changes, if any. But even if there are no changes or proposed changes, it is still required to submit a report to the governor containing and the Legislative Assembly containing its recommendations for any changes in the number and boundaries of the electoral districts. So, Madam Speaker, I hear the muttering of the elected member from East End over there, but he needs to look at what the section says. Regardless of whether or not proposals are made, the Electoral Boundary Commission, once appointed, is required to make recommendations to the Legislative Assembly and the governor. So it is required to take into account what's been proposed, but it's certainly open to them to give recommendations as they see fit. If one examines the two previous Electoral Boundary Commission reports which were done, the one in 2002 or 2003 and the most recent one in 2010, you will see a wide range of recommendations which they have made. In the case of the 2010 report, they even provided alternative recommendations about the kind of system that ought to be. So it is a matter for the Boundary Commission and what they wish to do. This government has expressed what we would like to see by virtue of the motion, of what's contained in the motion. Thank you. In the motion. And we have said that the government is desirous that the Cayman Islands be divided into single-member electoral districts. That is all that we have said. That is all that we have proposed. As far as the Electoral Boundary Commission is concerned. What the Electoral Boundary Commission wishes to do with that proposal is a matter for them. Of course, Madam Speaker, we fully expect that the Electoral Boundary Commission will have much regard to what is the wish of this House in this respect, and we would not expect that they would ignore it. But the Electoral Boundary Commission may have views about a range of other things, and it is quite open to them to make whatever recommendations they see fit with respect to that. Whether or not this House accepts those recommendations ultimately is entirely a matter for this House. The Electoral Boundary Commission does not have the power of decision making. It has only the power to recommend. It is this House ultimately which will decide what will be the result. And to make sure, Madam Speaker, that everyone understands that, let me continue my analysis of Section 89 of the Constitution. I'm going to read Section 89(1) again. An electoral boundary commission shall, as soon as practicable after its appointment, review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which the Cayman Islands are divided, and taking into account the changes or proposed changes, in this case, the proposed changes to move to single-member electoral districts. That's the proposal of the government. Taking into account the changes or proposed changes, if any, in the number of electoral districts. Well, obviously, Madam Speaker, there would have to be a change in the number of electoral districts to get to single-member electoral districts because we've got 18 elected members. Or of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, we have not proposed that there is to be any change in the number of elected members, shall submit a report to the Governor and the Legislative Assembly containing its recommendations for any changes in the number and boundaries of the electoral districts. Subsection 2. In preparing its report under this section, the Commission shall take no account of the racial distribution of electors within the Cayman Islands, take into account the natural boundaries within the Cayman Islands, have regard to existing electoral districts, and subject to the foregoing provisions of this section, ensure that so far as reasonably practicable, across all electoral districts, there will be an equal ratio between the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly representing each electoral district and the number of persons qualified to be registered as electors under Section 90 in that district. And 2, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman shall, between these two islands, at all times return at least 2 members to the Legislative Assembly. So, Madam Speaker, pausing there, those are the parameters, that is the criteria by which the Commission will have to go about its work. And so it will have to balance these two competing provisions, one, having regard to existing electoral districts, and 2, seeking so far as reasonable practicable across all of those districts to get an equal ratio between the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly and the number of persons qualified as voters. So what that means, Madam Speaker, is they must strive to have, as close as possible, equal numbers of voters in each electoral district. And therein is the genesis of the concern of the members from East End and North Side, because the way these numbers are looking, we're going to have roughly 1,100 voters in all of the districts except East End, North Side, and Cayman Brac. So, but it's not our position to do anything about this. Even if we wished, we couldn't. This is a matter for the Electoral Boundary Commission. Their constitutional duty is to consider these issues. Madam Speaker, then Section 89.3. This is the way the process is supposed to unfold. As soon as maybe after the Commission has submitted its report, the Premier shall lay before the Legislative Assembly for its approval the draft of an order by the Governor for giving effect, whether with or without modifications, to the recommendations contained in the report, and that draft may make provision for any matters which appear to the Premier to be incidental to or consequential upon the other provisions of the draft. And 4, where any draft order laid under this section would give effect to any such recommendations with modifications, the Premier shall lay before the Legislative Assembly, together with the draft, a statement of the reasons for the modifications. So, Madam Speaker, what this is saying is, as soon as the report is completed and given to the Governor will have drawn up an order reflecting the recommendations which he will give to me. I then have to bring that to the House to seek the House's approval. If the government which I lead is of the view that the recommendations require modifications, I still have to bring the order with a statement of reasons for the modifications that we seek to the order. And then I have to move a motion in the way that I moved this motion this morning, asking the House to approve the draft order either with or without the modifications. If it is approved by resolution of the House, well and good, and I will submit it to the Governor, who will make the order final and publish it in the Gazette, and the order will come into force for the determination of the boundaries of the electoral districts for the next general election after the dissolution of the current House. If the House votes it down, then we have to go back and try to make amendments which would have been indicated in the debate by members and bring it back and keep doing that until we get resolution. That's the way the system works. I go through that in some detail, Madam Speaker, to say that not only the fears, but the premise on which the members from East End and North Side are proceeding with respect to this motion that's before the House and the motion which they brought in the first place back in February, is that somehow the Electoral Boundary Commission has the power to do all sorts of things. The only power the Electoral Boundary Commission has is the powers set out in the Constitution, which is to make recommendations. It is this House which will ultimately decide yea or nay with respect to the recommendations. And, Madam Speaker, they also appear to be proceeding on the premise that they and anybody else can tell the Commission what to do. I was careful to point out what Section 88, subsection 9 says, is that nobody, not even the governor, has power over the recommendations and the direction of what the Commission does, only to ensure that they comply with the provisions of the Constitution. Now, Madam Speaker, in the motion that was brought in January of last year and was dealt with in this House and which failed, the motion by the elected member from East End and seconded by the member from North Side, made no mention whatsoever and clearly did not take into contemplation the need for the appointment of an electoral boundary commission, because it asked the House to resolve that the government bring a bill within 3 months of the passage of the motion. Madam Speaker, that is physically impossible. The whole premise of single-member constituencies and one person, one vote is about fairness, about each voter in the system. Because everybody talks about one man, one vote. I used to say, I hope they meant that the women can vote too. But it's not even one man, one vote. There are many men and women in Cayman who can't vote. It is one elector, one vote. Because unless you are registered on that list, you can't vote. Hence, the language we have employed in our motion, which is we're desirous of Cayman Islands being divided into single-member electoral districts, because that is the language of the Constitution and the law, and each elector having one vote, because that, again, is the language of the law. But, Madam Speaker, the principle, coming back to my point, the principle is equality of franchise or equal suffrage. And to proceed as the members did in February or January and February of last year, on the basis that there need not be an Electoral Boundary Commission survey and report, is in direct contravention or contradiction of that principle. Because they absolutely knew that the number of voters had significantly increased since the last Electoral Boundary Commission's report in 2010, because we had just gone through a general election, and that the number had increased by more than 3,000 people. So for them to try to compel the government to bring amendments to the elections law without going through that process, which they know full well, you couldn't go through that process in 3 months. In the past, the Electoral Boundary Commission's reports have taken 3 to 4 months to prepare in the first place. Then they have to be considered. Then we have to go through the process, which I explained, of an order by the draft order by the governor, my bringing it here, moving a motion, seeking to get the approval of the House, before we then go and start to seek to draft amendments to the election law to reflect what it is that the House has decided. So they knew full well that this was an impossible provision with which the government could ever comply, and that the government could never agree to those terms. And as I said, Madam Speaker, the motion which they have filed this time is in precisely the same terms. Now, Madam Speaker, they seek to have the government, I heard them on the radio about this, commit to this process being completed by the 30th of June next year. Madam Speaker, the resolution says that the government commits to the process being completed in good time so as to ensure that the general elections June 2017 are conducted on the basis of single-member electoral districts with each elector having one vote. Madam Speaker, we can't go further than that. We can't go further than that because we are not in control of all of the components of the process to get us there. I've taken time, Madam Speaker, to explain that the Electoral Boundary Commission, once it is appointed, has to do its work. It is subject to direction by no one. What length of time they take, what hurdles they encounter in going about their work are not matters which we can have in contemplation, nor do we have control over. And so, Madam Speaker, we cannot commit ourselves to a particular date because, as I said, we are not in control of all aspects of the process. Now, Madam Speaker, based on history, based on what has transpired with respect to the two previous reports, we believe that between the passage of this motion and the 30th of June, which is roughly 9 months, the process should be able to be completed, including the necessary amendments to the elections law. But we are long enough in the tooth to know better than to give those two members a date which we are not in control of, and them use it to do what they have become experts in doing, beat the government half to death. If for some reason completely outside our control, we can't meet the date. So I regret to have to disappoint them in that regard, but the government thought long and hard about the resolutions or the resolve provisions in the current motion. Madam Speaker, I hope that has gone some way to deal with the technical objections to the motion, which we have heard a lot about over the course of the last few weeks from the two members. And I want to turn now to speak a bit about why it is that the government is taking this step at this stage, and to address some of the allegations, criticisms of myself and the government about this matter. Not just from those two members that I've been talking about all morning, but more broadly by our detractors. Madam Speaker, it took some doing, but some of my good staff were able to put their hands on a document which we submitted, we being the PPM, the People's Progressive Movement, and precisely the parliamentary opposition in the Cayman Islands, which at that point was made up by the People's Progressive Movement, back in July of 2002. Madam Speaker, back in July of 2002, the parliamentary opposition was made up of the then
Honorable Premier,
Yes, ma'am.
can you ensure that the chair has a copy before we finish, please? Thanks.
Forgive me, Madam Speaker, I do have your copy.
Thank you.
I was hesitating because I was trying to determine how I should describe them. Because the first elected member for Georgetown, Mr. Kurt Tibbetts, was not then leader of the opposition because the Constitution had not yet been amended. But he was the leader of our party and the spokesperson. And then there was, God rest her soul, Mrs. Edna Moyle, a member for Northside at the time. The current Deputy Speaker, Mr. Anthony Eden. The elected member for East End, then and now, Mr. Arden McLean, and myself. And the document that I've just handed you, Madam Speaker, entitled Position Paper of the Parliamentary Opposition, Cayman Islands, on the report of the Constitutional Modernization Review Commissioners in 2002, was the work product and position of us as the parliamentary opposition, and indeed of the party which we had formed. And we submitted this to Her Majesty's government back on the 10th of July 2002. Madam Speaker, while this paper is the position, or was the position, of all of us, and I say this, Madam Speaker, only because I think I need to try to deal with some of the absolutely preposterous and outrageous allegations of the elected member from East End about my position with respect to this. This paper was drafted by me. I wrote it, as I did most, if not all, of the major documents which my party produced at that time. It is not all my work. It is not all my views, but I was the one, the scribe, may I call it that, of this document. And as early as then, indeed, Madam Speaker, before that, we had taken the position that we supported single-member constituencies and one person, one vote. Back then, Madam Speaker, this is what we said, because this was in the height of the electoral reform that was underway. On page 15, section 4, the parliamentary opposition believes that the issue of one man, one vote is the single most important constitutional issue that needs to be resolved to give full legitimacy to our democratic government. The present system in which a resident of Georgetown has 4 votes, but a resident of East End only 1, is unfair and, in our view, undemocratic. We strongly support the proposal to move to one man, one vote. My signature is appended to this July 2002. In the interim, the elected member from East End changed his position at one point to support at-large constituencies. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But for him and others to claim that because of the approach that we have adopted to this, and he claimed it well before we won the government, at a time when all he and others were seeking to do were to use our party while and its means to achieve their end without giving any credence or credit to the party and its leadership. He claimed from then that I didn't support single-member constituencies and one person, one vote. Madam Speaker, the Hansards of this House are replete with the various utterances about this issue on my part and on the part of everyone else. But, Madam Speaker, there is a principle that I do not believe the elected member from East End fully understands, and that is that In leadership, in order to lead, you have to have people who are prepared to follow you. And if you run down the road waving your flag, this is the way you're going, and you look back and there's nobody there, I'm afraid you may think you're the leader, but you really are not. I've said before, I say again, there is no single issue save that of integrity that is worth causing major rifts and problems within the government. Of course, it is the objective and desire of those who are not in government to create as much strife and issue and problems for the government as it possibly can, in the hope they can bring the government down and that they can then become the government. That's quite legitimate. But it needs to be understood by the people of this country that stable government, a government of integrity, a government that can move the country forward, is something that is good for all of us. And as the leader of this party and the leader of this government, I strive every waking moment and even in my sleep, because I wake up in the morning sometimes and find I've been grinding my teeth, so I know I've been stressing about something, to work towards consensus building on every major issue that this government deals with. I've said before, I say again, the issue has never been that there was any member of this team that did not support the principle of equal suffrage and of equal weight in terms of vote. The issues that some of us had and some of us still have reservations about were about the size of constituencies and the possibility of manipulation of very small constituencies, and an attempt to find a way to ameliorate or mitigate that. Hence the proposal which I articulated back in February when we were dealing with the failed motion of the elected members from Northside and East End on this issue, about a combination of single-member electoral districts and at-large constituencies. We went away after what transpired in February, and we thought about it again. We discussed it again. At one point, Madam Speaker, I said in answer to questions from one of the media houses, a direct question, that I doubted whether we would achieve consensus on this issue in this term. I said what I honestly believed. That caused some consternation, but Madam Speaker, on reflection, it was a good thing, because what it did was to force us as a government, as a caucus, to sit down again and say and analyze the concerns and objections that we have. And to conclude, many of us have had to do, including myself, is that no system is perfect. Because if we wind up with a situation where the elected member in East End can get elected on 250 or 300 votes, but it requires 800 or 900 to get elected in Georgetown, where he represents, in terms of the electorate, 600 people, and I represent 1,200, that's not perfect. Far from. But if we wait around trying to find the perfect system, another term would slip by and we would make no further advance. When we looked, Madam Speaker, at the at-large constituency proposal and discussed it with the Attorney General, we concluded that it would require a small, but nonetheless an amendment to the Constitution to give it effect. And I know from experience that anytime you're talking about constitutional change, no matter how minor it is, unless it is something that the UK is actually pushing themselves, you just don't know when that process will actually be completed. from a pragmatic standpoint, this issue of electoral reform is not what's on the lips and in the minds and in principle in the concerns of the people that we represent. There is a small, relatively vocal group for whom this is a major issue. And it is an obsession of the members from East End and North Side who seem to think that somehow going down this road is going to improve their chances of getting into government. But Madam Speaker, the government cannot be distracted by an issue like this when we have so many critical issues as it relates to the welfare of the people of these islands and its future to deal with. We cannot be coming to this House every 6 months to deal with a single member constituency motion by those two members. We have to continue our efforts, and I should say, which are meeting with considerable success, in turning the economy around, putting people back to work, creating more jobs, getting the finances of government back in order, building back the credibility of the Cayman Islands, and as I read today when I made the statement, dealing with the constant challenges to the livelihood of our people and the unwarranted attacks on our financial services industry. Those are the things which occupy, not to mention, Madam Speaker, actually I should, the issues around crime. Those are the things that have to continue to be the principal focus of this administration. And so, Madam Speaker, having been faced with another one of these motions, our government, my caucus, and I'm proud of them, sat down and we agreed to work through whatever the issues were that we had and to come up with the best possible proposal we could to put this issue to bed once and for all. As I said, we do not believe that this is perfect. We believe that there is significant inequality. Unless there's a combination of East End and North Side, there'll be significant inequality. But that notwithstanding, Madam Speaker, no system is perfect. No system is perfect. And this is the position set out in the motion that we have taken. Madam Speaker, I believe I have addressed as far as I wish at this point the concerns as I've heard them expressed by those two members from East End and North Side, and I've tried to analyze the relevant constitutional provisions and also to explain the government's position. I just want to finish, Madam Speaker, with one observation. I'm reminded of this because of an article I saw in the Cayman Compass, I think it was yesterday or the day before, resulting from, in part, from things I had said at the press conference when I announced that the government was proposing this motion. And that is the impact of single-member electoral districts on the outcome of the electoral process. Madam Speaker, I've heard many over the years, including the two members from East End and North Side, articulate the view that moving to single-member electoral districts will somehow break the party system and to make it more possible for individuals to get elected rather than persons who are part of an organized political entity. Madam Speaker, the world over, and the Caribbean in particular, the introduction of single-member electoral districts has served to absolutely entrench the party system, not only the party system, but to entrench the two dominant parties in many of the countries in the region and elsewhere. If you are not a member of one of the dominant parties, your chance of being elected is significantly reduced. And if you get elected, you wind up doing most of your political career what the elected members from East End and North Side are good at: sitting on the sidelines, sniping at the government, but effecting no real change, either in the lives of the people that they represent and the districts that they represent, or overall in terms of the national of what national policies are. And Madam Speaker, the electorate comes to recognize that very swiftly. And so, as the leader of one of the dominant parties and now Premier, rather than being afraid or worried or concerned about the impact of this move to single-member electoral districts, I celebrate. I celebrate, Madam Speaker, because I believe my experience, and some of them have been experiences, and some of them have been very bitter, has taught me that without organized politics, at least in this modern era of Cayman, chaos ensues. You cannot expect that a group of people who have been elected on separate platforms and who have nothing in terms of ideals or positions or principles or policies in common are forced together in the aftermath of an election, and that you are going to wind up with an administration which is able to, at least not in any short order, is able to lead the country and to have positions on education, policy, and health care, and crime, and whatever it is. There needs to be organized politics for any progressive nation. And whether they call them parties or they call them groups or whatever, it needs to be a grouping of people who stand together, and people know what they stand for, and people know when they elect the group who the likely leader is, who the likely ministers are going to be, and understand what it is that the policies and positions of that grouping are. That is not to say that independents could never get elected. They do. But the chances get smaller and smaller. And the other factor, Madam Speaker, which we've all learned in recent times, is the costs of running a political campaign are absolutely astounding these days. And without the benefit of the party machinery and what the party machinery can do, you're going to struggle. Anyone is going to struggle to make any impact nationally. And so, Madam Speaker, for those who believe that the move down this road is somehow going to do away with the party system, particularly for the two members from East End and North Side, I would urge them, if they want to be around in the long term, they need to join a party or start one. Because the chances of, even if you get elected, of being able to do anything to effect any real change outside the party structure is very, very limited. And so, Madam Speaker, with those words, I won't say few, with those words, I hope that I have been able to articulate the government position with respect to the motion, and also to indicate why we cannot accept the the proposed changes which I anticipate will come from the members from East End and North Side to the motion that is before the House. And I hope that I've gone some way to let the country as a whole understand what the government's position is, what the changes will mean, and why the government has taken the position it is taken, and why we have done so at this time. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the member from East End.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to, in accordance with Standing Order 25, suborders 1, 2, 3, and 4, I beg to move the following amendments to Government Motion number 1/2014-15, entitled the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, SI 2009, number 1379. 1, that the second whereas be amended by inserting the word 18 after the words divided into. 2, by deleting the fifth whereas in its entirety. 3, in the final whereas by deleting and proposed changes in the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly. 4, by deleting the second resolve section in its entirety. And 5, in the final resolve by the deletion of the words "in good time" and substituting the words "before June the 30th, 2015.
Is there a seconder?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I beg to second the amendment motion.
The amendment to the motion has been duly moved. Does the member from East End wish to expound thereon?
Yes, ma'am.
Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, in the same way that the Premier has now put his forward, I hope to do the same thing. I don't want to get this into a shouting match, but certainly I would begin by saying that first of all, that the Premier knows that I'm a party man. And when I was part of that party, he used to do much better in his deliveries and his justification. I don't know what happened since I left. Madam Speaker, the Premier has said a whole number of mouthfuls during his presentation of this motion. He has also laid some serious accusations on the floor. But the biggest thing he has done, Madam Speaker, is that the Premier has made this about the member from East End and I, from Northside and I. That's all it's about. It's obvious now why this motion is on the floor. It's obvious why this motion was put here. We were questioning, and I have been questioning all along, why the government had to bring this motion here, when this same objective could be achieved by inviting the governor in his capacity as the Premier, inviting the governor directly to do it. But now we know what it is. It's about the member from Northside and I. Let's admit it, that's what it is. So, now that we have straightened that out, let me get my time in now too. Madam Speaker, first of all, the Premier has said that I have fears about losing my seat if we amalgamate, join up east and the north side. One of us fear of losing our seat, we got to compete against each other. Madam Speaker, he read Section 8 and 9, I believe almost in its entirety, but he brushed over the real important part and didn't explain it to the people of this country. But I will. You notice, Madam Speaker, a goodly premier brushed over the part about the review and alterations of electoral district boundaries. In that, in subsection 2, it says, in preparing a report on this section, the commissioner shall take no account of the racial distribution of electors within the Cayman Islands. B, take into account the natural boundaries within the Cayman Islands. C, have regard for existing boundaries. Key. That is where he has failed to explain 8 and 9. And then, in D, subsection 2, Cayman Brac and Little Cayman shall between these two islands at all times return at least 2 members to the Legislative Assembly. Now, Madam Speaker, we know that Cayman Brac has a special carvel. That is true. Cayman Brac has a special carvel. And it has less than 1,000 electors. So, if the Premier and his government are looking to make electors equal in this country, is he proposing to change the Constitution and Cayman Brac only get 1, 2? That's all he has to say. Because, Madam Speaker, whether you vote one person and the first 2 pass the boss, or we split it in 2, it is less than 500 electors per member from Cayman Brac. Now, the Constitution has put the minimum already. I heard the Premier say in the press briefing, credit to him, that it will be a long time. Or he said, let me not say long time, but it will be a while before East End North Side and Cayman Brac, or 2 constituencies in Cayman Brac, will get higher, like 1,100 per representative. It'll be a while. He agreed to that. And I applaud him for agreeing to that. But all of a sudden, Arden afraid. I wonder who up. Oh my God. You say people come tell you, ease me up. My friends, okay, Mr. Premier, I am grateful for your generosity. But I promise you this, that we shall meet in the battlegrounds. And only one comes out of that. That is East End. Not 6. Not 6, not 4, not 2. So, Madam Speaker, and I can get to all of my stuff, Madam Speaker, back up 2 hours. Madam Speaker, but I want to explain to the country too the same way the Premier did, and I appreciate him for that. You see me sat here and didn't say anything. That's fine. Madam Speaker, the Premier said that the one principle about leadership that the member from Northside and I don't understand is that you have people following you to be a leader. I understand that, Madam Speaker. For the benefit of the Premier, I very well understand that principle. The principle in leadership that he doesn't understand is that he needs to step forward and say, what are you doing? So that the people can believe him. Because that the people can trust him. Because in the absence of trust in a leader, and the country fails too. We got create, he said, chaos. Is that a word he used? In the absence of trust in a leader, we create anarchy. That's what happens. Now let's talk about the trust. If today someone does not trust you, your spoken words, later on, when they test the veracity of your words and found them to be true, then that's how trust is developed. If they can't, the veracity of your words are proven false, you have lost. You have lost the principle of your leadership. Now, Madam Speaker, the reason the member from Northside and I brought this motion is because on the day of the press briefing, I was on the show when it was announced on the, what was the show here? For the record. And he read it out that it had just been received, and he asked me my opinion of it. And Madam Speaker, I said to him I was cautiously optimistic. Because I know I have been around here long enough too. The same way the Premier claims to have been here, he and I were elected on the same day, the 8th of November, 2000. What the Premier said in the press briefing in response to questions is not what this motion that he brought down here says. You remember I said veracity? Remember we talked about veracity a minute ago? And I welcome anyone to compare those two. Because he was talking about 18 single-member constituencies at that press briefing. And it's not here. We got 18 seats, so put it in here. Precisely, we come to that, Mr. Premier. My good friend are coming to it. Don't worry, I ain't leaving you behind. We got to be right there together, just like we always have been. Madam Speaker, the Premier said that this is about that the member from Northside and I have been concerned about or expressing, let me get it right, Madam Speaker, because I wrote it down, expressing the possibility of single-member constituency wiping out, that it will break up parties. The implementation of single-member districts, electoral districts. Madam Speaker, that if I and the member from Northside wants to exist for a long time, I think the words were, we need to join a party or make a party. Couple things I need to say to the Premier before I move on. One, I was a party man before him. Two, I joined an UDP. And three, that the third option is wide open to me. Let me explain why I was a party man before him. The other option was creating one. Try remember now. I know you got a pretty good short-term memory, you not got long-term. Madam Speaker, I was elected on the 8th day of November, 2000. On the 10th, I met Roy Bodden and Gilbert McLean right here by this parliament. I was coming from, by this building, I was coming from the Tower building. And they invited me to a meeting at your good house, your good self house in Prospect that night, Madam Speaker. Watch out, the long-term memory is good. Madam Speaker, there's no need for us to go through all that detail of what transpired. Suffice it to say, by the following Saturday, everything was flat as face, the horse trading. And the Premier and my good friend, the Minister for Works, the Honorable Kurt Tibbetts, went and joined with McKeever, the leader of the opposition. Over the next few days, it was all up in the air. This country did not know where it was going, how it was going, and why it was going. Madam Speaker, we were scheduled to be sworn in on the 15th of November 2000. Madam Speaker, I ain't gonna forget this because it's forever etched in my mind. On the Tuesday night, the remnants of that first group had a meeting, televised meeting on the floor, on the steps of the courthouse. Dr. Frank, myself, Gilbert, your good self, Lyndon. We were the little stragglers. I was a new man on the block, new rookie. Madam Speaker, that night, of course, everybody wanted me to get up and speak first. And I did. Madam Speaker, on national television in this country, I said to the people that I was going to start to represent in these hallowed halls the following morning at 10. I said to them, the only thing that is going to stop this horse trading is part of politics. When I came down, Dr. Frank said to me, that's the end of your political career. What? See where I am 14 years later? Why you saying gone? Madam Speaker, so I just wanted to remind the Premier that I have always been a party man. Early in 2001, when this legislature voted to remove my good friend, the late 2000. Let me tell you when it was. It was on the anniversary date of the election date of November 2001. Since you don't remember, I do. Oh, well, I said earlier. Oh, my good friend and my dearly departed good friend, the Honorable Edna Moyle. When everybody sat in here, I believe you're the only one abstaining, you know, Madam Speaker, from that vote. Anyway, Madam Speaker, I told them I didn't vote to put them there and I wasn't voting to remove them. Anyway, Madam Speaker, shortly thereafter, by early 2002, that is, February, March, the then quote-unquote leader of the opposition, my good friend from Northwood, said we need to deal with something and try to organize something if we are going to remain in politics. I was a founding member of that party, 5 of us. Miss Lucille, the Premier, the Minister for Works, Miss our dearly departed friend, the Honorable Edna Moyle, and our good friend, the member from Bordentown, the first elected member from Bordentown, and Miss Lucille, outside the parliamentary membership. So the Premier must understand that I understand the concept of parties and their value. There is no way single member constituencies will ever kill a party. To the contrary, it feeds it in many instances. But I am saying it is also better for the country. And it's also the possibility that other people can get elected. Now, he said that I could get elected in East End on 200 to 300 votes. I wonder how you get elected, come on, back on. When you split them up. Madam Speaker, we would have to change the Constitution. Everything is carved out in here. Even for Georgetown, it's carved out. For every constituency, it is carved out. Now, if he wants to show leadership, he needs to step up and say he wants to change the Constitution. And it's no simple change. Because you got to have the Deputy Premier on top of you, and you got to have the Speaker on top of you about changing Cameron Brack. So, Madam Speaker, the Premier needs to, I said he had lost his way in his deliveries. He needs to stop it. He knows better, you know, but everything is about the member from Northside and myself. So, Madam Speaker, you know, I don't know, Madam Speaker, where that courtroom thrust that my good friend the Premier had has gone. I don't know. I don't know if he has passed it over to the Attorney General, but there's so many lawyers on our side now, maybe they have all taken a little piece out of him. Madam Speaker, he and I will go down in history in this country as the best in this country in recent history. Together, we were like peas in a pod. Together, we dealt with anybody on that side. All of a sudden now, because I'm here and he's there, there's a problem with me bringing anything. That can't be right, Madam Speaker. You know, you need to stop that. You know, you need to give that a break. And Madam Speaker, he knows that I am right. He knows that when he says we should not be here on this debate, he knows I agree with him. There is no need for all this wasted legislative time. It's a waste of legislative time. A colossal waste of time. My only way of holding the government's foot to the fire is to put motions in. That's it. If the government is mindful, they accept it or they don't. How was I to know what position the government was taking, Madam Speaker, but to put that motion back in? I didn't know. They had since January, and nothing was said, nothing was done. I think it was the 28th of January or something like that, that it was, I like the emphasis on defeat that he continues to talk about. It wasn't so much of a defeat. But Madam Speaker, so I resubmitted it with a few changes. He cannot say it's identical, with a few changes in the recitals. And then the government comes back with this. So, Madam Speaker, and my response to that was to try and see if we could sit down and remove both motions from this floor of this honorable House. And I made efforts to try and do that. Here we are today. When them three little bills we got, we could come down here one day and they could get back up there, do what they got to do. Yeah, but we got 10 private members motion, but so what? They're not going to take very long. Here you are now, a debating foolishness, wait till he can get back up. Well, you're not got another shot at this, have you? I know you got wind up on that motion, but I got one on the floor I got wind up on too. That is the problem. We don't need to be this back and forth. We shouldn't have had to be here. The Premier, in his position as the Premier, could have invited the Governor to appoint a commission. What would I have been able to do with my motion then? Still action for 3 months? I would have had to withdraw it. But I tell you, it's about the member from Northside and I. That's all it's about. He has just explained that. Leadership means people are behind you. When you're going down the road, when you look back, that means people are behind you. He just explained that. That's one of the principles. Don't allow him to put blindfolds on you whilst you're following him. That's the key. You must have your eyes wide open when you are following. That's the problem with me. I had mine open. Madam Speaker, the Premier says that my motion wasn't no good because I know he couldn't amend the election law. Madam Speaker, by now you're about now keep paper, right? CNS posted on Wednesday, July the 3rd, 2012 at 8:05 in politics. Go look for it. Just change election law. Opposition leader Alden McLaughlin who has previously noted that there may not be enough time to hold a referendum before the 2013 election and educate the voting population on the new system, has said that he agrees wholeheartedly with this position.
Member from Easton, do you have a copy for the speaker? If not,
We can
won't
get
you
it.
conclude?
Yes.
Thank you.
He told CNS that if the Premier moves straight to change the election law, there would be more than enough time to ensure the country is prepared and voters understand that they will be voting for just one candidate from the list, in consideration smaller constituencies in the case of West Bay, Town, and Georgetown. Now, it was okay for him to say that in 2012. Here I come here in January 2014, and it's not okay. We did that. We understood. Keep digging. I don't speak as Premier, but we didn't have the increase in electors. No, Madam Speaker, let us talk about the electors. Where are those electors? There has been an increase in East End. There has been an increase in Cayman, has been an increase in Northside, has been an increase in Town. Throughout the whole country, we have had increase in electors on the register. Are you talking about 3 in East End? The last election, it was 598 or something like that. It's over 600. Was 644, and I believe 2 passed just before. At the time of the election I'm talking about, Madam Speaker, this motion that the government has here is asking this legislature to agree to invite the governor to appoint a commission in accordance with Section 88 of the Constitution. Now, Madam Speaker, there has never been a need to bring such motion to this legislature. In the 2 previous occasions, it was done by order in council, and the governor, in his own discretion, appointed the people. There was never a need to bring it to the legislature to appoint to ask the governor to appoint. The Constitution does not contemplate the need for the legislature to ask, to invite the governor. The fact is, Madam Speaker, everyone in this country knows the position Mr. Miller and I have taken. We want it. Whether the Premier said that the motion was right or not, he know what the intent was. The same thing, change the election law. And then we'll have it in there 18, then we go to wherever we got to go to get it done. 62 only increases the membership. 60 subsection 2 only increases the membership. But Madam Speaker, we have never had a need to bring it here. Everybody knows what Mr. Miller and my position has been all over the years. On January the 28th, we found out the position of other people, including some members from the other side. And I'm not criticizing them. And also members of the opposition. By August, July this year, the Premier announces that he has consensus. That means everybody on that side is on board. That means the two of us, he can count on the two of us as well. And then he can count on the deputy leader of the opposition and the third elected member from Georgetown, West Bay. They voted for the motion, or we can assume he can count on it. Now, the leader of the opposition ran the last time, and he has publicly said he is not supporting it. So we can leave him out for a minute. In this case, his Wakona was a Mobile. The only other member of this parliament elected, see the Attorney General looking, the only other member of the elected members of this parliament is the Speaker. And the Speaker has no right to make public utterances on issues of this matter. There is no place for the Speaker to make those utterances. That's no disrespect to her. That's how it works. So that's only one we don't know what the position is. Why are we bringing it here? Unless the Premier doesn't trust some of his people. I trust it, the member from North Side. Then he got to stay with me. And I appreciate that. I appreciate, Madam Speaker, that this motion, if the Premier wants it to be for all of us to vote on it, I will vote on it. However, Madam Speaker,
Member from
it needs to say 18.
East.
Pardon me?
No, I was just going to seek your debate in such a fashion that I knew whether you were debating the amendment still or whether you had made a transition back to the motion. I would ask you to stay on your amendments if you could, please.
Madam Speaker, I keep telling the Premier, he and I came in here the same day. I saw you. You know we did this before, my good friend. You know we did this before. Madam Speaker, there is no need for a motion to come here asking us to agree to invite the governor to carry out the responsibilities that she is whole and soul of hers, and we do not say what we are asking her to instruct the commissions to review. Their terms of reference, Madam Speaker, is the governor, Madam Speaker, and I'm going to show. I'm going to show, Madam Speaker, what I mean by that. Madam Speaker, I hear him out about substantive motion. Madam Speaker, how am I going to debate the amendment unless I talk about the substantive motion? Because I'm amending it. Madam Speaker, no, I respond to the things you have said. I think you're getting away with them. Madam Speaker, the mandate of the 2010 commissioners was, and I read from it, the 2009 Constitution establishes the EBC, whose general role is to review the electoral district boundaries and submit a report to the Governor and the Legislative Assembly consisting of 18 elected members. More specifically, the EBC is required to review the boundaries of the electoral districts into which the Cayman Islands are divided. Interpretation of the mandate. Unlike the terms of reference, TOR of the 2003 EBC, which required that the Cayman Islands should be divided into 17 single-member constituencies, the TOR of the current EBC requires the EBC to review the electoral district boundaries and submit a report to the Governor of the Cayman Islands and the Legislative Assembly containing its recommendations for changes in the boundaries of the electoral districts with a view to the Legislative Assembly consisting of 18 elected members. Madam Speaker, the mandate from 2003 was the Electoral Boundaries Commission appointed under Section 28B of the Constitution is required to submit a report to the Governor as soon as practicable after its appointment, recommending the boundaries of 17 electoral constituencies into which the Cayman Islands should be divided with a view to each constituency to return one member to the Legislative Assembly. Madam Speaker, the key is they were given a term of reference for a specific amount. Now, Madam Speaker, we talk about them having a mandate to do. Madam Speaker, I got to draw the government's attention to some of the areas that these very people in 2010 when they were the same EBC in their report in 2010 talking about the public meetings where they draw their information from, where they drew their information from and determining their final report. On page 8 says, when they were listing all of the things they had received, some stakeholders expressed fear that the even number of 18 elected might create hung legislature. Madam Speaker, what I'm saying is, theoretically, if they had the mandate, they would have acted upon that and recommend an increase in Parliament. But Madam Speaker, if we are not recommending an increase in the membership of Parliament, of the legislature, then there is nothing wrong with putting in 18 into it. Madam Speaker, let's move on to the fifth whereas in the Premier's motion, which reads, and whereas Section 62 of the Constitution provides that a law made under Section 59(2) may increase the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, but no such law shall come into force unless an order by the Governor providing for the electoral districts and their boundaries to take account of the additional elected members in accordance with Section 8 and 9 has been made. Madam Speaker, what the government is doing is introducing a new discussion. a discussion that only this Parliament has the authority to do. And there is a particular process for that. That is, Madam Speaker, to make a law, it has to have discussion in the public. Here we are with the government introducing it into a motion that the government is asking me to vote on, to approve, to invite the governor to carry out her responsibilities. Why are we talking about the making of a law to increase the membership? Madam Speaker, the Premier went to great lengths to read 59(2). Madam Speaker, 59(2), as the Premier read, says, subject to this Constitution, the legislature may make laws for the peace, order, and good government of the Cayman Islands. Now, we got to satisfy one of them for us to be able to make a law. Subsection 2 says, 60 subsection 2 says, a law made under 59(2) may increase, not decrease. Nobody's worried about decreasing. May increase the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly, but no such law shall come into effect, into force. And then it goes on about appointing the commission, the governor, and stuff. Madam Speaker, is this government proposing to increase the membership of this Legislative Assembly? That is the question. Madam Speaker, the government has now introduced it into their recitals. Why? Why, Madam Speaker? Somebody needs to tell us why. Why are we moving towards talking about and now making this Parliament debate a section of the Constitution which gives the Parliament, the members, the authority to propose an increase? Is this for the benefit of instruction to the governor? Is that what this is for? Madam Speaker, the Premier talked about, and then may I just go on that, Madam Speaker? In my third proposal, it says, in the final, whereas by deleting and proposed changes in the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly. Madam Speaker, where has there been a proposal? What proposals do we have? Madam Speaker, somebody needs, if the government has been doing this, they need to make the public know. There has been no proposal for increase or changes in the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly. We are 18 right now. The Premier, I would appreciate if the government, if they all get up and say what their position is on this matter. Madam Speaker, how you justify a resolution unless it is in your recitals? How do you justify a resolution? How do you come to a resolution unless there's a cause for a resolution, a reason for a resolution? Is that how it is done? So we can just bring results here? Madam Speaker, I have a fundamental problem with having to vote on a resolution agreeing to instruct or invite the governor to do a particular thing that we have not introduced. We have done nothing with it. Now, under 59.2, we agreed to that during the last discussion on the Constitution. And the Premier was on board with it. As a matter of fact, we had proposed 17. And when we found out the 2/5, it was going contrary to the 2/5 rule of cabinet being 2/5 of the full membership, we had to increase it to 18, thus the equal number. The Premier made it very clear it was going to be extremely difficult for us to propose to get 3, much less 4. That's why we couldn't go to 19. But all of a sudden now it appears like we have changed that. And we want to go to 19. I don't know, because I don't know what the increase is going to be. I don't know.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order.
Honorable Premier, what's your point of order?
Madam Speaker, I know you are giving the member from East End considerable latitude, but he really is not entitled to claim, based on this motion or on anything I said, that this government is proposing 19 seats. He needs to stop chasing ghosts, because there is no such proposal in the motion. The resolution speaks not at all to any increase in membership. Whatever is going on in his head is fine, and perhaps you will let him say it. I just wish that he would not attribute it to me or to the government's motion.
Member from Eastern, please refrain from specifying a number of the increase, as there is no implied or direct resolution in this particular motion.
Madam Speaker, since that is your rule, and can someone then tell me why is that 5th whereas in this recital, in these recitals? Why? Why is it that the Premier, and he talking about why what's going on in my head? What going on in my head is the lack of trust. That's what's going on in my head. And I need to open it up on behalf of the people of this country. That's what's going on in my head. I ain't mad either. I would love to spread that. But I don't want to spread that one. I ain't mad. Lack of trust. Can't trust on it. On to decide which one I can't trust. Madam Speaker, I didn't specify that there was any 19. I said during the talks, and Madam Speaker, I can prove it. Madam Speaker, I did not say that we wanted 19. Madam Speaker, I said we proposed 17. And the Premier, the now Premier,
at the time said we were going to get kickback for 18, much less for 3, much less 4. At the time, the Parliament was 15. I want to know if we are now going to 19 or whatever the case may be. Madam Speaker, I think I propose it. All the Premier need to do is take out that section which discuss 60 subsection 2, which is about increasing. And then in the last whereas, it again talks about the electoral boundaries, reviewing changes in the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly. The proposed changes, I want to know where they are. Whether that's 19, up to 19, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know. But I want to know where these proposed changes in the number of elected members of the Legislative Assembly come from in these recitals.
Member from Easton, is this an appropriate time for the luncheon break?
Thank you very much.
We shall now suspend for the luncheon break and we'll convene at 2:30 p.m.